First of all, I would like to say thank you to Rudy and the Society to give me this opportunity to have this talk. Today, I will give everyone a very brief introduction about the Chinese cavefish. And we have worked on those fish about more than 10 years. So we got some nice information. And can I start here? What can you see from this slide? Nothing. That is exactly the environment where the cavefish live. It's totally dark and no light, no plant, no so-called photosynthesis, and no producer. So, but that is a kind of extreme environment. But in this environment, actually quite a few organisms live here. And we can easily find the representatives from every single phylum, and there are some examples. This is a amphipod, and this guy is very common, and in many caves, in many places. And this is a blind cricket. We can see there's no eye on head. And it is a snail found in Mexico. And this is a beautiful shrimp found in China. And this we all know, this is a bat, very common. And what are we missing here is cavefish. But before I talking about the cavefish, I would like to introduce, there are some very important terms I want to clarify in advance. Firstly, what is cave? Cave, there are different definitions for the cave, but generally, cave means those natural opening with a kind of size so people can walk through. Therefore, that's kind of a small mud cave on the roadside. That doesn't count. But for the cavefish, because they need water to survive, so in this case, the cave means the limestone cave with a subterranean water or subterranean river. Next, what is a cavefish? Just like a cave, there are different definitions for that, and even the different names. Like this one, the blindfish. This name probably a little bit narrow because not all the cavefish are blind. And our definition for cavefish is those freshwater fish restricted to the cave environment. Of course, it's a subterranean river or subterranean water body. And their entire life history, or at least a part of life history, will rely on this cave environment. Without this environment, they will not survive. So that is the definition for the cavefish. And for this kind of a cave environment, the cave animal will always have some morphological change or morphological adaptation. We call this is a troglomorphism. For different cave animals, the troglomorphism may be including different aspects. But for the cavefish, we will see from this picture, the fish will always lose their eyes, and they got a transparent body, and lose their body color. And also, the scales will be always degenerated until to loose. And sometimes they will prefer have a very longer fins. And for the Chinese cavefish, there are another two characters. One is this very unique character. It's a horn-like structure on nape. And another one is the humpback profile. But unfortunately, so far, we don't exactly know the function of these two characters. We have some hypotheses, but we don't have very hard evidence for our idea. Depending on the troglomorphism, we can separate those cavefish as two groups. One, we call it a troglobite. That includes those cavefish with a typical cave morphological adaptation for the cave environment. But for some other cavefish, they doesn't have a very typical cave character. They just look like a surface fish. So we call it a troglophile. It's like this one. And therefore, we can also call this kind of fish a typical cavefish. And this one is atypical or untypical cavefish. Here, we will figure out the one thing. Not all the fish we found in the cave are cavefish. For example, like the common catfish, we can always find it in the cave. But without this cave environment, they can survive very well. And also some other fish, because of different reasons, they came to the cave. So we call those kind of fish accidental. And that's the rest of it is a real cavefish, including these two groups. Okay, next, maybe I should, okay, this is convenient. I will introduce some background information about the cavefish before I talking about the Chinese cavefish. This is the map for the cavefish distribution in the world. From this map, we can see all the localities just distributed in between the north latitude 40 degree to the tropical of Capricorn. So most of the cavefish are only distributed in the tropical or subtropical area. Unfortunately, the entire Europe doesn't have any record cavefish. And in this world, there are at least two hot spots in terms of species diversity. One is centered in Latin America, including part of North or South America, and another one in Southeast Asia, including part of China here. And for these two hotspots, actually, those cavefish come from different taxa. And like in North America, many cavefish come from this order, Cobitidae. And in South America, many cavefish are catfish, different catfish. In Southeast Asia, almost all the cavefish come from the Cyprinidae forms. But in China, many fish come from Cyprinidae, and in other Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, like Myanmar, the many fish come from Cobitidae. It's kind of a mountain loach. Okay, what about cavefish in China? Before I started this study, I don't know. Actually, China is the first country to have a paper record on both troglophile and troglobite cavefish. In 1436, there is a Chinese traditional doctor. He described one species in his medication book as a kind of a Chinese medicine, of course. And 100 years after that, 1540, there is a local officer. He traveled to a cave named Alu Cave and found a transparent fish. And he wrote it down in his travel note. And this is today we know this is Cynocyclochilus hyalinus. It's also a very rare species. And as we all know, the modern biology started in China very late. So till to 1980s, the first blind fish just described by Chinese ichthyologists in 1979. And this table showed the first three described blind fish in China, so all at that time. But after that, from this figure, we can see that almost every year, especially from 2000 till to now, every year several cavefish species has been described or found. Okay, how about the Chinese cavefish, the species diversity and the taxonomy of Chinese cavefish? High species diversity is a very important character for Chinese cavefish. So far, in my calculation, till to right now, we have already 106 valid cavefish species, and including the 4 species being published in this year. And I found this number from FishBase. In UK, there are 96 freshwater fish species, including the introduced one. And in France, there are 123 freshwater fish species. Now we can imagine how many cavefish species we have in China. This is a work about Chinese freshwater fish we just finished. Now we know in China we have 1,254 pure freshwater fish species. And this is a map to show the species richness of the Chinese freshwater fish. And we can see these are several dark blue are rare, that with very high species diversity. And in this part, I believe the Chinese cavefish contribute a lot. Now for the cavefish species, it accounts about 8.5 of Chinese freshwater fish. It's a quite big number for cavefish. To compare to the other countries, we can see from this figure, the number of cavefish species in China is more than any other country. The second one is Brazil. They have 26 cavefish species. Okay, about the taxonomy and fish fauna in China. And here, all the Chinese cavefish, although we have that many, the number of species of cavefish, but all the cavefish come only from Cyprinidae forms. And in three families, basically, I can say the Chinese cavefish equal to some plus some mountain loach and a few loach species. That's the species composition. This is a table to show how many species for each genus. And we can see from this table, this genus is very special. They have a very high species diversity. I will talk about it later. And Cyprinidae, this family have 4 genera with cavefish. And please notice this blue mark. That means this genus is endemic to China. And next is Cobitidae. In this world, there are only 2 troglobite cavefish in this family. They all both distribute in China. And Cobitidae, this family includes 7 genera with cavefish species. 3 of them are endemic to China. And this genus and this genus are very important because they have a very high species diversity also. This figure to show the cavefish species composition. This light plume means the troglophile, and dark one means the troglobite. And we can see some genera just composed of all the troglophile fish, but some other genera just have troglobite cavefish. We in this recent 10 years, we did quite a few work or study on this genus because this genus has a very high cavefish species diversity. And this genus, Cyprinidae, was established in 1936. All the species from this genus they all have a cave dwelling behavior. So they all are cave fishes. And this genus is endemic to China. And so far, there are 53 valid species. If we are talking about described species, maybe this number will be 60 or 70. So that is the biggest Cyprinidae genus in China. And the local people call this fish a golden line barb because troglophile fish, we can see their beautiful body color, especially these leather line scales that form the very beautiful golden line from the head to the tail. So that's why the local people call it the golden line fish or golden line barb. We built a phylogenetic tree based on the DNA sequence analysis, and we got some result. This genus is a monophyletic group, and including the 4 different clades. We give them name as the name of each representative for every clade. And from this map and the table, we can see that each clade has their own morphological character, which is very distinct, and that they all have their own distribution area. And only these two has a very little overlap in their distribution. This is some species from glade G. And this glade, very interesting. They all have this kind of hole or hook. This is some species from this clade. We call it angularis. And this clade is several turgles because they all have this kind of humpback profile. And this clade, most of the species from this clade are troglophile fish species. So because I don't have much time, so I will not talk too much about this genus. All the studied results have been summarized and put into this book, but unfortunately it's in Chinese. Okay, actually we are thinking if it's possible to translate it into the English. Okay. Okay, the distribution about the Chinese cavefish. This is a map to show the distribution of the Chinese cavefish. This is a part of China, and this is a very important river. We call it Changjiang River or Yangtze River. And please notice these several localities on the north side of Changjiang. They all belong to the one cavefish species. And the rest of 105 cavefish just distributed here. Okay, let's look at this guy. This guy is kind of a bob. He only distributed in the north side of Changjiang, in North China. We know the bob is kind of a fish to live in the tropical, subtropical area. How can this guy survive in the cold winter in China? Because this guy has this cave dwelling behavior. Every winter, this guy will find a cave to hide from December to next April. So he can survive in the north side of Changjiang River. Okay. And rest of the cavefish species just distributed in this narrow area, the narrow cluster area, including 3 provinces. From this next figure, you can see this is the distribution for every province, and these 3 provinces, they have a very high cavefish species diversity. And for the cavefish, actually this is very common. Most of the cavefish only distribute in one or several caves or in a particular subterranean river. Their distribution area is very, very narrow. So that is a big problem for the conservation. Another interesting thing is sympatric distribution for the cavefish, very common in China. I can give you a very long list for them. I know there are thousands of reasons according to the sympatric distribution, but none of them, I believe, none of them is because of sympatric speciation. Because isolation is very important for the evolution of the cavefish. And this phenomenon always happens. It's like one subterranean river separated two by some reasons. Then the populations will evolve respectively. And sometimes they will rejoin together or they join to other subterranean river. So that makes this kind of a sympatric distribution. Next, I will talk about the habitat diversity. Cavefish just distribute in the subterranean river. Their habitat sounds simple, but actually it's not. Firstly, okay, this is a Chinese bill of renminbi, and this picture showed a typical cluster area. Those cavefish only distribute in this kind of area. And this is several pictures to show some characters. On the surface, those limestone was dissolved by the water or the surface water or by the rain. They formed like this, we call it a stone forest. And in this area, the soil is very rare. So the local people couldn't find enough soil to grow the crops. Therefore, they're kind of poor, very poor. And underground, there are very complicated subterranean river system or cave system, very many branches and different levels, and we can see from this these photos. Okay, I divided all the habitat as 3 main types and some several subtypes, and we will see some examples. Firstly, the steep subterranean river, like here, the position here. Here we can always find the troglobite fish from this kind of habitat, including the river and the subterranean pool. But the river will be always change a lot between the rain season and the dry season, especially the water level. Next habitat is because there are many intermittent openings along the subterranean river. We always call it sinkholes. If the sinkhole too big, we will call it 天坑. It's kind of like 500 or 600 meters wide and 500 or 600 meters deep. That's we call it 天坑. And in this kind of habitat, because there's resource, the food resource or energy can put into the subterranean river, so the population of the cavefish here are a little bit higher than the rest of the place. We can also find the troglobite fish from this kind of habitat. And this one is very important. This is the both end of the subterranean river. Entrance and exit, especially the exit. There are several sub-types for the exit. This is very simple. We can see this subterranean river just directly joined to the surface river. This very clear water from the cave, and this is the surface water with much mud. And always, the subterranean river will come out, will form a kind of a small pool or small pond. The local people call this kind of a pool called the dragon pool. But we didn't find dragon there. We found some troglophile cavefish. And the human activity is also very important. They played a very important role. We built a dam with the subterranean river and formed this kind of a small reservoir. So this is similar to this dragon pool. And we also can find the troglophile fish species from here. Chinese cavefish, in the cave environment, they have, I believe they have 2 directions for the adaptation, including the different spikes. For example, the lateral line system, they have a very complicated lateral line system, especially on the hand, with very many branches. And eyes, there are 2 directions. In a totally dark environment, they will lose their eyes until to nothing. But in some dark environment with some light in, they will prefer have a bigger eyes. Opposite to the eye, we can observe that for some fish, they have a smaller eyes, but they have a longer bubbles to instead of a part of a function of eye. This is very interesting. From these several pictures we can see, this series is that home series. And we can see there's different levels of different the home. And to this guy, this whole hook is very complicated. And this is a humpback fish. And this guy finally got this hole on the back. From the X-ray photos, we can see this hole actually composed of part of skeleton. And here it's not very clear, but this hole here is just come from some fat tissue. So they come different tissue, but they have a similar morphology. But unfortunately, I couldn't give you the right answer for the function of this this character. Why they have these similar characters? Okay. Also, we have that 106 species of cavefish, but they all facing the different threats. So that's a big problem for the conservation of the cavefish. Among those different threats, I think there is one most important is habitat degradation. These figures to show the habitat degradations by different influence. And I can give you some examples here. In the Castlereagh River, the surface river or surface water is very rare. Very rare, so this looks kind of dry on the surface. So the local people have to draw the water from the underground or from the cave. So they put a lot of pipes here into the cave and use the pump to draw the water every day. So they make much noise, and also that's influenced the cavefish. And these are pictures to show how the local people they use the subterranean water in their normal life. And someone also built a house in the cave. I think that's a very clever idea, because in the cave, in winter that will be warm, in summer that will be cold. So that's a pretty good idea. And we even built a road through the cave. And this is a good example. Do you remember when I showed the troglomorphism, I put a picture of that. That is a very rare species. This is a type of locality for that species. And now this cave has been opened by constructing this fancy road. We went there in 2005 and found nothing in this cave. So that's a big problem. Except for the habitat degradation, the overexploitation is another kind of influence on some cavefish. Here is an example for these two species. They distribute in different lakes. And they have a very high price for selling because the tourists want to taste of them. Yes, that's happened. And this is the price of the cavefish, and this is the price of the common fish like a grass carp or the common carp. And this is the price of maybe 5 years before. I believe now the price may be even higher. That's like this around 600. That means 60 pounds for per kilo. That's maybe now it's 2 times than that. Because of this, the local people will try to catch those cavefish as much as possible. So they become very rare. And then some very clever man think of another way. They use tinka. You know tinka. They all have this gold body color, and looks like that cavefish. Because actually nobody knows how the cavefish look like. So they use that instead of the cavefish to earn more money. That's good for the conservation, but bad for the tourists. But from another side, we can see how rare this cavefish is. For catching those cavefish, the local people use a different way. Generally, they use this electric fishing machine. But sometimes, I met one time, they use a bomb inside the cave. That's very dangerous. Okay, recently, the exploration and tourism is, in the cave is very, very popular. This is the example for the, this is from the Alu cave where is the first troglobite fish we found from that type locality. And we went there, and we also found nothing. Introduced species also have some small influence on some particular cavefish. I'm not too okay. For protection of the cavefish, I think there are two big problems. One is the knowledge on the cavefish. Actually, we know nothing about them, especially their life history, their behavior. When they reproduce, we don't know. So that is very important information for the conservation, but we have nothing for that. Another problem is benefit. The local people cannot get any benefit from the conservation or from the protection of the cavefish. How can you give them, let them to protect the cavefish? That's another big issue. But we have done something for the protection, although it's fun enough. We have put some cavefish into the red list, and now we are going to put all the cavefish into the new National Animal Protector list. And right now, some, not many, but some, the local protector area has been built, just aiming at the cavefish or the cave environment. I think that's a good point. And not only one species. This is a troglophile cavefish species. Now its artificial breeding was successful. So we did something, but for the protection of the cavefish, I think we still have a very, very long way to walk. Okay, I think I will stop here. Thank you very much.